Inflation just hit a 40-year record. Money is losing value faster than ever. And the IMF just issued a warning that could change everything about your economy. Here's what they're not telling you. In 2022, global inflation reached levels we haven't seen since the 1980s. The International Monetary Fund, the world's economic firefighter, stepped in. But here's the twist. Their solution might be making things worse for ordinary people like you and me. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how the IMF operates, why this pattern keeps repeating, and what it means for your wallet. Let's rewind to 2020. COVID-19 hits. Governments panic. The US alone injected $5 trillion into the economy. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet exploded from $4 trillion to $9 trillion in just 18 months. Europe, Japan, China, everyone printed money like there's no tomorrow. Economics 101, more money chasing the same goods equals inflation. But in 2020 to 2021, inflation stayed low. Why? Lockdowns. Nobody was spending. Then 2021 arrives. Vaccines roll out. Suddenly everyone wants everything at once. New cars, home renovations, vacations. But supply chains were destroyed. Container ships stuck in ports. Semiconductor factories shut down. The global just-in-time supply system collapsed. February 2022. Russia invades Ukraine. Two of the world's biggest grain exporters go to war. Natural gas prices in Europe increase 10 times. Oil hits $130 a barrel. Energy crisis meets food crisis meets supply chain crisis. By mid-2022, US inflation hits 9.1%. The highest since 1981. UK reaches 11%. Turkey, 85%. This wasn't just a crisis, it was a global economic earthquake. So the IMF steps in. But here's what most people don't understand. The IMF isn't just an advisor. It's one of the most powerful financial institutions on Earth. Born in 1944 from World War II's ashes, the IMF was designed to stabilize currencies and provide emergency loans. But here's the power move. To get an IMF loan, countries must accept conditions. Cut government spending, privatize companies, remove subsidies, raise interest rates. It's monetary policy as leverage. And who controls it? The US has 16.5% voting power, enough to veto major decisions. Europe combined has 30%. China, 6%. Africa combined, less than 7%. This reflects 1945 power structures, not 2025 reality. As inflation spiraled in 2022, countries needed help. Pakistan's reserves dropped to 3 weeks. Sri Lanka ran out of fuel. The government literally collapsed. Egypt's currency lost 50% of its value. The IMF's answer? Austerity, cut subsidies, let prices rise, reduce public jobs. The theory, cool demand, stabilize currency. The reality? In Pakistan, electricity prices doubled. In Egypt, bread subsidies slashed. In Argentina, which has gone to the IMF 22 times, poverty reached 40%. The middle class gets wiped out. Meanwhile, the debt keeps growing. Because IMF loans come with interest, and when your currency is collapsing, that dollar debt becomes impossible to pay. So countries borrow more, accept harsher conditions. The cycle continues. Now let's bring this home to America. You might think, this is a developing country problem. Wrong. March 2022. The Federal Reserve raises rates from 0.25% to 5.5% in 16 months. The most aggressive hiking cycle in modern history. That 3% mortgage from 2020. Now 7.5%. That's $1,000 extra monthly on a $400,000 home. Credit cards average 24%, highest on record. Your savings earning 4 to 5%. Inflation still eats 3 to 4% of your purchasing power. You're barely treading water. But here's the global connection. When the Fed raises rates, the dollar strengthens. The dollar index jumped 25%. Great for American tourists. Catastrophic for the world. Why? Emerging market debt is in dollars. When the Pakistani rupee loses 30% against the dollar, their debt becomes 30% more expensive overnight. You borrowed $1 billion at 100 to 1 exchange rate. Now it's 130 to 1. You suddenly owe 30% more. This is the dollar dominance trap. 88% of international transactions use dollars. 60% of reserves are dollars. Oil, priced in dollars. American monetary policy becomes global monetary policy. The Fed's rate hikes worked. US inflation dropped from 9% to 3%. But the collateral damage? 3 major banks collapsed in March 2023. Silicon Valley Bank, Signature, First Republic. $500 billion in assets. Gone. Commercial real estate dying. Tech layoffs hit 260,000 workers. And when emerging markets collapse, they stop importing American goods. Factories in Ohio and Michigan lose orders. A default in Zambia affects copper prices. That affects Chile. That affects Chinese manufacturing. That affects Apple's supply chain. That affects your 401k. Welcome to the interconnected global economy. Here's where economic history gets scary. We've seen this before. Multiple times. 1982, Latin American debt crisis. Mexico defaults. The IMF steps in with structural adjustment. Result? The lost decade, 10 years of stagnation and hyperinflation. 1997, Asian financial crisis. Thailand collapses. Indonesia and South Korea follow. The IMF arrives with $110 billion. Conditions, slash spending, raise rates. South Korea's unemployment triples. 2008, global financial crisis. But people forget, Greece's austerity was so severe, their economy shrank 25%. Youth unemployment hit 60%. And the debt increased from 130% to 180% of GDP. The medicine made the patient sicker. Now 2025, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Egypt, Ghana, Tunisia, Lebanon, all in crisis. The IMF has programs with 93 countries totaling $116 billion. Here's the pattern. Crisis hits. IMF lends with strict conditions. Those conditions shrink the economy. Debt becomes harder to pay. Another crisis. More loans, stricter conditions. Repeat. This isn't conspiracy, this is documented financial history, and it's been the pattern for 40 years. So who wins? Winners, dollar holders, multinational corporations like Apple, Google, Microsoft, financial institutions, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, BlackRock. They profit from volatility. Crisis is a business opportunity. Losers, retirees in Turkey who lost 80% of savings. Middle class in Egypt, Argentina, Pakistan. Hollowed out, young people globally. If you don't own assets, you're falling behind. That 28-year-old with student debt and rent. Getting squeezed. Small businesses can't access cheap capital like corporations. And here's what should make you angry. The people who caused 2008, most are fine. Banks got bailed out. Executives kept bonuses. But the homeowner in foreclosure? Still recovering 17 years later. The financial system privatizes profits and socializes losses. So where does this leave us? The IMF says we've achieved a soft landing. Inflation is cooling. Crisis averted. Not quite. Food prices still 25% higher than 2020. Rent hasn't stopped rising. Healthcare costs accelerating. The cost of living crisis isn't over. It's normalized. And the debt? US national debt is $36 trillion. Global debt hit $315 trillion. 333% of global GDP. That's not sustainable. Here's what you need to know. Economic history doesn't repeat exactly, but it rhymes. The patterns are there, the institutions haven't changed. Your move? Understand the system. Protect yourself through diversification. Stay informed. Drop a comment. Do you think the IMF helps or hurts regular people? And subscribe. Next week, we're diving into the 1920s, Weimar hyperinflation, and why it's more relevant today than ever. Stay informed, stay skeptical, and follow the money. You're watching Financial History Chronicles, where money, power, and history collide. Subscribe now, and never miss the next chapter of how the past shapes your wallet today.